The legendary Barrett .50 caliber rifle was a historical anomaly. Engineers built the armor-piercing cartridge exclusively for heavy-mounted machine guns. A deafening roar tears the air. The ground vibrates violently under the M2 Browning. The bullet rips out of the steel barrel. It punches clean through aluminum aircraft skin. It shatters solid concrete blocks into jagged dust. 10 to 15,000 foot-pounds of kinetic energy. That force mirrors the sudden, brutal impact of a high-speed car crash focused into a half-inch point. Where did the need to pierce armor with a handheld weapon come from? The roots trace back to the trenches of World War I. In 1917, combat mutated. Steel replaced flesh. Tanks and armored planes brushed off standard infantry fire, forcing commanders to seek a weapon that could tear through solid metal. John Browning delivered it. He designed a massive 650-grain projectile. The bullet weighed 12 times more than a modern 5.56 round. A human body meant nothing to this mechanical beast. Browning engineered the cartridge solely to obliterate steel engine blocks and reinforce concrete. Rough, flimsy newsprint. The sharp scratch of a graphite pencil outlining a weapon of mass destruction. To shrink an anti-aircraft shell down to a handheld rifle, the military-industrial complex was useless. It took a wedding photographer named Ronnie Barrett. The spark ignited on Percy Priest Lake. Barrett stood on the shore, photographing a prototype riverine patrol boat. Through his camera lens, the frame shifted. His eyes locked onto the deck. Twin M2 Browning machine guns sat mounted on the steel hull. A devastating caliber meant for war zones, sitting right in front of a civilian. The frame clicked. The obsession took root. Cut to a dark garage. No sterile laboratories, no engineering degrees. Just Barrett's hands pressing hard against cheap newspaper stock. Global defense corporations burn millions of dollars on research. Armies of engineers spend years calculating stress physics and recoil management before cutting a single piece of metal. Barrett sketched the foundation of a semi-automatic 50 caliber monster in a matter of days. He carried those fragile sketches to local machine shops. The industry slammed the door in his face. Professional machinists took one look and rejected the design. They told him the harsh truth of the system. If the concept actually worked, someone vastly smarter would have already built it. The military machine had no room for an amateur. Barrett ignored the mockery. He found a handful of rogue machinists willing to risk their time. They retreated into the garage, cutting, grinding, shaping solid steel bar stock by hand. 4 months later, the beast took shape. It weighed exactly 50 pounds. The crude steel prototype jammed constantly, but Barrett pulled the trigger and the heavy weapon fired. Making a crude slab of steel spit fire was only the first step. Barrett had to cheat physics so the kinetic shock wave wouldn't shatter human collarbones. Where does the energy capable of tearing tank armor go? Steel springs absorb it an inch from the shooter's face. The trigger snaps, an anti-aircraft cartridge detonates. The barrel physically jolts backward, exactly 1 inch. It moves while still locked tight to the bolt. This is the short recoil system. The mechanical heart of the weapon swallows the initial blast, then the violence transfers. An accelerator arm catches the kinetic shock. The heavy steel bolt clanks, thrown back with crushing force. A curved cam track forces the lock open. The spent brass ejects. A fresh round slams upward from the 10-round steel magazine. At the exact same millisecond, searing gas hits the muzzle. A massive dual-chamber muzzle brake catches the blast. It violently vents the exhaust left and right. Without this mechanical choreography, the backward force would pulverize a human shoulder. Instead, the brute energy is tamed. Thick buffer pads catch the remaining shock. The monstrous kick becomes a heavy, manageable push. The physical impact drops to the level of a standard 12-gauge shotgun. Flesh and bone survive the mechanical violence. The final reduction in felt recoil hit exactly 70%. But mechanical genius meant nothing in the past. To understand the true value of Barrett's system, look back at 1967. and the physical hell endured by Marine sniper Carlos Hathcock in Vietnam. He had already secured 93 confirmed kills. Then came a single shot at a Viet Cong guerrilla pushing an ammunition bicycle. Distance, 2,400 yards. Hathcock fired twice. The first bullet smashed the metal frame. The second ripped through the target's chest. The .50 caliber cartridge proved its terrifying precision. You would expect a sleek, high-tech sniper rifle for such a record. The reality was a monstrous 84-pound heavy machine gun. Hathcock bolted an 8-power scope directly to the receiver. He stabilized the beast with heavy sandbags and a massive tripod. Dragging this setup was agony. Thick canvas straps cut deep into his shoulders. 38 kilograms of dead iron pulled him down, while the suffocating, humid jungle air turned every step into torture. The military possessed a cartridge that could kill at an impossible distance. They had no portable alternative. Building a portable semi-automatic prototype in a dusty garage, Ronnie Barrett expected standard military contracts. He got ghosts instead. His first real buyers were not regular infantrymen. They were CIA operatives running covert wars. How did American intelligence arm the Afghan Mujahideen with a groundbreaking anti-materiel weapon? Through a cheap mail-order catalog. A desk in Langley. The dry rustle of thin paper. An agent flipped through Shotgun News, a cheap magazine for civilian gun enthusiasts. A fateful black and white advertisement caught his eye. He dialed the number. That single call shifted the balance of power in the Hindu Kush. Weeks later, smugglers dragged unmarked wooden crates through the freezing, jagged mountain passes of Afghanistan. The weapon earned its designation from its birth year, 1982, the M82. But the business of war nearly broke its creator. Barrett hand-built the first 30 rifles. The process devoured 9 agonizing months. The financial math was brutal. Manufacturing one unit cost $8,000. Barrett sold them for a dismal $2,300. He bled money on the first batch. He took a heavy loss on the second. Only the third production run finally generated a profit. The CIA ignored Barrett's financial struggles. They needed a tool to kill Soviet aircraft. The agency established the M82 as a true anti-materiel rifle. Barrett built it to shatter equipment, not flesh. A Soviet Mi-24 gunship cost over $15 million. It dominated the sky as a flying armored beast. Now, a lone insurgent hiding in the rocks could rip that multi-million-dollar war machine out of the air using a $2,000 piece of garage steel. The economics of guerrilla warfare flipped overnight. The Shadow War proved the brutal efficiency of the design. Regular armies finally paid attention. In 1989, the Swedish military became the first conventional force to formally adopt the rifle. They purchased 100 units. The weapon stepped out of the shadows and entered the global market. A massive clash of armor and human bone loomed on the horizon. On August 2, 1990, Iraqi mechanized divisions rolled across the border into Kuwait. What happens to a human body when a piece of metal the size of a palm slams into it at supersonic speed? Exit wounds the size of a grapefruit, splintered bone, ruptured veins. Following the invasion of Kuwait, the Marines urgently ordered 125 new rifles. But the true horror of the weapon was measured not in pierced engines, it was measured in shredded flesh. The .50 BMG caliber does not just kill, it annihilates biology. The heavy bullet strikes. Flesh instantly compresses under the blow. Monstrous energy floods the chest cavity. The pressure brutally expands outward. The back tears open, leaving a massive void. The math is merciless. The bullet delivers over 16,000 joules of kinetic energy. That equals a heavy passenger car striking a pedestrian at 30 kilometers per hour. All that raw force concentrates directly on a single point of impact. Troops trust their gear. You expect elite level 4 plates to save a life. Reality dictates otherwise. The .50 BMG punches through that infantry armor like a wet paper napkin. Engineers eventually forged special ceramic plates to protect helicopter crews. They weigh 10 pounds each. For a walking ground soldier, carrying that burden is physically impossible. But even without penetration, the sheer trauma kills. A dull crack of snapping ribs echoes under the Kevlar. The armor catches the metal. The shockwave continues. Lungs crush instantly. Blood vessels burst. Though the external vest remains visibly intact, the internal organs are completely destroyed by the devastating blunt force. The human frame simply shatters. Survival chances hit absolute zero. Surgeons in field hospitals stared in horror at the shattered anatomy left by a .50 caliber round. But behind the curtain of Operation Desert Storm, a deeply monotonous grind was already unfolding. Dim yellow light leaked from a cramped annex behind Barrett's house. Inside, 10 exhausted employees worked deep into the night. Metal dust, machine oil, chronic fatigue. The invasion of Kuwait on August 2, 1990, had sparked an immediate demand. The Marine Corps needed 125 rifles. To meet the deadline, those 10 workers assembled weapons in rolling shifts. They turned the mechanics of slaughter into a quiet, routine factory quota. Flesh tore on the front lines. Calluses bled in the rear. The rifles shipped directly to the Persian Gulf. Their combat debut fundamentally shifted infantry tactics. This garage-built tool bypassed the need for heavy anti-tank missiles or mounted chain guns. Marines simply leveled the heavy barrel and pulled the trigger. Armor-piercing cores tore straight through the engine blocks of enemy troop carriers. The destruction was absolute. 2,000 yards, the distance at which Marines annihilated armor. Norwegian forces used the rifle to detonate unexploded 155mm howitzer shells from a safe distance. By April 2004, the heavy weapon born in a cramped garage had evolved. It turned the Iraq War into a methodical, detached slaughter. How does war look when an entire mile of empty space separates you from someone else's death? It looks like a shift at a factory. Marine Scout sniper Steve Reich took his position. The flat roof of an abandoned oil storage tank, the heavy steel baked under the Middle Eastern sun. A trembling heat haze rose above the scorching metal, twisting and distorting the urban ruins inside his optics. Below, a bomb disposal team moved in to clear an explosive device planted inside an animal carcass. Then, the street exploded. Insurgents triggered a massive ambush. Rocket-propelled grenades sliced the air. Heavy machine gun fire pinned the Americans to the dirt. Reich tracked the enemy gunner through his scope. Distance, 1,600 meters. At this extreme range, the heavy sniper bullet flies for nearly 3 seconds. The target collapses dead before the sound of the gunshot ever reaches his ears. Reich fired. Miss. He watched the dirt kick up, read the wind, and dialed his elevation. He breathed out. The second shot erased the gunner. Then the geometry changed. 3 insurgents sprinted up an external staircase and vanished behind a solid brick wall. Their direct line of sight disappeared. But physical cover means nothing against armor-piercing ammunition. Reich mentally calculated their blind position behind the masonry. He aimed dead center at the blank wall. He pulled the trigger. A violent cloud of pulverized brick erupted in the air. Through the high-power glass, bright red splashes instantly painted the shattered gray rubble. The enemy ceased to be human beings. They became a simple color contrast on a ruined wall. The sun crawled across the sky. The temperature pushed past 90 degrees. The killing lost all adrenaline. It morphed into an agonizing 13-hour shift of waiting, calculating, and erasing. By the time he climbed down from the tank, Reich had killed 9 insurgents. Many of them died as anonymous red shadows behind brick and concrete. For this exhausting rooftop shift, Command pinned a bronze star to his uniform. Tungsten carbide, zirconium powder, high explosives. The Rafis Mark 211 round acts like a miniature chemical plant. It kills with cynical precision. The hardcore punches through steel and bone. Then comes a split-second delay. The bullet travels 30 centimeters deep into the target before the zirconium ignites. Flesh tears, organs burn. The exact ammunition that allowed Steve Reich to turn men into red dust came from a strict military catalog. In the summer of 2002, 2 years before Reich's 13-hour slaughter, the Army standardized this nightmare. Bureaucrats assigned the sniper rifle a dry index, the M107. Engineers swapped heavy components for titanium. They brought the total weight down to 27 pounds. No emotions, just specifications. Generals transformed combat into a corporate price list. The state machine packed burning tissue and severed limbs into neat acronyms. Armor-piercing, incendiary, multi-purpose. Logistics officers calculated death by the pallet. Every delivered cartridge carried a strict retail value. In 2004, a single Raufoss bullet cost between $75 and $100. That specific amount equaled the average monthly wage of a local Iraqi laborer. The military priced one projectile at 30 days of human survival. According to the official Pentagon catalog, a single pull of the trigger burned exactly $100. Striking targets beyond a mile turned this weapon into a legend. Before its legal $8,000 price tag opened a Pandora's box for global cartels, the rifle permanently fractured the landscape of Afghanistan. What does war look like when the enemy is beyond the reach of optics? It looks like cold, detached mathematics. In 2008, Army specialist Nicholas Randstad aimed at 4 fighters. The rangefinder read 2,100 meters. The distance exceeded the physical limits of his scope. Randstad aimed into the empty sky. Gravity handled the rest. The spotter confirmed the hit. The immense gap completely detached the shooter from the bleeding target. The weapon expanded the kill zone far beyond human sight. It reduced murder to a pure ballistic equation. 6 seconds of bullet flight. Enough time to draw 3 slow breaths before a man simply ceases to exist. The spring of 2012 brought a new terrifying milestone. 2 Australian commando teams tracked a Taliban commander across Helmand province. The distance was a staggering 2,800 meters. Both teams deployed Barrett M82A1 rifles. The trigger broke. A violent muzzle flash illuminated the rocky ridge. Then, absolute silence stretched between the firing point and the impact zone almost 3 kilometers away. The spotter watched his stopwatch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The projectile did not just pierce the atmosphere, it flew through a rotating planet. During those 6 agonizing seconds, the sniper had to calculate spin drift and the Coriolis effect. The Earth literally moved beneath the copper jacket. No roar of gunfire ever reached the valley. Death arrived faster than the speed of sound. The commander collapsed into the dust. While snipers pushed the limits of human sight in the Afghan mountains, the war mutated. The battlefield domesticated. Imminent death became a routine ticket for customer support. A jammed M107 sniper rifle. The heavy bolt refused to cycle. The night before, a Marine stripped the weapon for routine cleaning and applied too much force. He bent the structural ears of the lower receiver. The massive gun turned into 30 pounds of dead metal. But this mechanical failure did not happen on a quiet military base. Don Cook sat at his desk at Barrett Firearms Tech Support. He pressed a standard office handset to his ear. Through the cheap plastic speaker, he heard the sharp, chaotic crackle of real automatic gunfire. A Marine unit in Afghanistan took heavy fire. The enemy pinned them down. They dialed a civilian tech support line to survive. Cook diagnosed the crippled rifle entirely blind. He delivered the maintenance instructions over the phone. He ordered the soldiers to extract the bolt carrier. They needed to use its solid steel bottom to hammer the bent receiver ears back into alignment. The Marines executed the makeshift repair, racked the bolt, and immediately stepped back into the crossfire. A half-inch bullet tearing through thin aviation aluminum. The screech of ripping metal. a police helicopter spinning out of the sky over Jalisco. Hitmen gunned down state officials in the streets. Cartels shattered the state monopoly on violence. The exact same rifles that kept Marines alive in the desert found a new purpose. Thanks to a legal civilian price tag, they began flowing uninterrupted into the hands of Mexican cartels. The pipeline relies on a system called straw purchasing. A citizen with a spotless record walks into a licensed dealership in Texas. They buy the weapon over the counter. No red flags. Then the erasure begins. Smugglers lock the heavy steel in a vise. Grinders chew through the metal to destroy the serial numbers. Sparks fly. The trace vanishes. Couriers strip the rifle down. They hide the massive barrel and upper receiver deep inside car doors. The disassembled pieces cross the southern border unnoticed. Back home, the original buyer simply calls the police and reports the weapon stolen. $8,000 to $10,000. That is the exact price a cartel pays to purchase the power to ground state aviation. The financial math was brutal. A routine cartel smuggling budget easily covered dozens of these rifles. This vast purchasing power instantly nullified the technical advantage of the Mexican regular army. Local police stood absolutely no chance. Standard body armor tore open like wet paper. Armored vehicle engine blocks cracked in half. Cartel gunmen turned the streets of Michoacán into active combat zones. Only military units possessed the heavy firepower to fight back on equal terms. The weapon transcended street warfare and bled directly into mainstream culture. It became the ultimate symbol of untouchable criminal supremacy. A highly popular Mexican musical group literally named itself Caliber 50. In response to shattered helicopters and thousands of dead, the Mexican government in 2021 attempted to crush the corporation with a $10 billion legal strike. But can a paper law ever stop a hardened arms empire? Their track record of legal invulnerability actually started back in 2004. California became the first state to ban the .50 caliber rifle. Politicians expected the legislation to choke the weapon's spread. Reality proved much more cynical. The engineers simply narrowed the neck of the brass casing. They forged the .416 Barrett cartridge. New bullet, same lethal ballistics. The ban shattered against pure engineering. This corporate defiance scaled into a massive geopolitical paradox by 2021. A sovereign nation was begging an American court to penalize a private family business for the total collapse of its own internal security. Mexico pointed at the armed cartels. A district judge pointed at the law. The case was thrown out. The $10 billion remained untouched. The lawsuit died. The assembly lines kept moving. Ronnie Barrett simply handed the drafting board down the bloodline. His son Chris designed a new precision multi-caliber system. The military signed the contracts without hesitation. Today, they stand as the only designers to have their rifles officially adopted by the armed forces across exactly 2 generations.